So speaking of Stafford, about a week ago, there was reports that the Rams were giving him permission to speak to other teams and see what would be a good suitor for him because they were about done with him. They didn't want to sign him to a long-term deal. And fast forward to, as of a couple days ago, they signed him to a contract extension. So what are your thoughts on, all the moving parts there with, the Aaron Rodgers flirtation to going to LA? Stafford was, relatively pretty close to going to the Raiders. Mm-hmm. A lot of moving parts here. So what do you...
And there was also a Cowherd projection, I believe, that he was going to the Giants. The Giants were going to trade down from pick 3. First things first, when I saw the extension announcement, I never saw the specifics about it, and I'm not sure if they've come out on the length of years. That's really important to me. I imagine he's not making less than 35-40 million, which is about what he signed for in LA when he got there. Mm-hmm. But I'd be interested to see how long he's supposed to be there. I mean, I think he's coming up on his late 30s, so you wouldn't want him there for more than 3 years. 4 would be the maximum to me, the hard ceiling. This is not a Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers class of quarterback that I would want playing at 40, and I don't even want Aaron Rodgers playing at 40. Tom Brady's kind of 1 in a million in that regard.
Right.
But even a Drew Brees, who played till he was 38, 39, and then it started to slip from there. His arm talent just deteriorated. Given that Stafford has never really had that rushing upside or that ability to create time in the pocket like an Aaron Rodgers, his arm is going to expire at some point, and I think the quicker the Rams figure out their cap situation with him and move on, the better, long run.
I gotta say, I think this is a pretty big mistake the Rams are making. I think, you've been in contention. You were 6 points away from beating the Super Bowl champs just a couple months ago, and
in a snow game.
And Stafford's not even. He doesn't have any historical success.
He's one of the worst weather performers in the NFL.
You mentioned a 4-year deal being an absolute ceiling for extending Stafford. I think that there's 100% chance that his arm is cooked by the time that deal is done. So with that being said, this was your chance to get out, trade him, move up in the draft, go get, a Jackson Dart, go get a Quinn Ewers, a guy, any of these guys that have success from college, or even, look into a Sam Darnold, a guy who's been in the 49ers system, a guy who had a ton of success last year in Minnesota, and bring him in, continue to build up your young defense, go get maybe another weapon because you're losing Cooper Kupp, and, keep this team relevant. And I think that them choosing to tie their future to Matt Stafford is going to be a mistake for them because like I said, I think he's just going to deteriorate. He's not athletic enough. He doesn't bring enough to the table besides the big arm, flashes that are going to lead to sustained success through his 40s.
Mm-hmm. And I think, this is one of those mistakes of wanting to do right by a player to a fault. You're not doing right by your system anymore because your defense got incredibly young last year and you have good talent and a good coordinator, and your offense has some of those pieces in Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams and now Blake Corum also in the backfield. It's like you're trying to get younger, but you're not willing to sell out and just liquidate all the old players you can. Mm-hmm. Aaron Donald retired and that freed up some cap for you, but now it's like, unless Stafford retires off of a stinker year, like you're tied to him. You cannot get out of that, which means you can't bolster your line, for a rookie QB to come in and absolutely light it up. You can't go get a suitable receiver too. Puka, is he equipped to be a receiver 1 right now? I mean, I think he's pretty close to it, but not one of the top 5 guys that we look at, with a CD, Jamar, Justin Jefferson, even Amon-Ra, Nico Collins, AJ Brown. He's not quite in that caliber to me, and I think a big part of it has been that Cooper has, been an elite receiver for the last few years, pretty much since Stafford got there. So Puka coming in, having a similar skill set, being a speedster, they can't account for both of them. With Cooper gone, is Puka going to thrive, or can you really just have 2 safeties eye him and shut him down? I'd be interested to see how next year looks for them. I'm really assuming that Cooper Kupp gets traded just because it's seemingly what he wants and it's what the Rams want too. But I don't know who they can bring in to replace him. There's not a surefire receiver candidate in the first round to replace Cooper Kupp. And I'm not even sure that receiver is your biggest need, assuming you do trade him.
Yeah, I think they definitely got to look into their secondary as a glaring need for them. They didn't have a bona fide cornerback one last year, and it hurt them in stretches. You said that there's not really a guy in the first round that can replace Cooper Kupp. As far as prime Cooper Kupp, maybe, but last year Cooper Kupp, even when he was in the lineup, was doing cardio. He wasn't doing a whole lot production-wise. So, going and getting a guy in the second or third round, like a Jimmy Horn, a Torrey Horton out of Colorado State, any of these guys, young, athletic, which is something Cooper Kupp just isn't anymore. I think that would be, I think that'd be good for them. But, you mentioned like timing, and, I'm not talking about the timing, mid-play. I'm talking about timing as in, your roster and roster construction. So you have this young ascending defense, and you have a young guy like Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, like you mentioned. If you're able to get a quarterback on the same timeline as them, as the quarterback is ascending into a good, starter, a Pro Bowl level guy, your defense is peaking. Your defense has ascended. They've gotten enough experience to where this is as good as they're going to get. If you wait for your defense to peak, and now Stafford, you're paying Stafford, and he's old and he's not as good, and
continues
he's retiring.
to regress.
Now you bring in the young quarterback. He's not ready to contend for Super Bowls as a rookie or a second-year guy.
Right.
So, I think that's just a critical misstep by them. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sean McVay could find a way to make a rookie quarterback work this year. It might not be the prettiest thing without protection, and with only one receiver and not really any depth in that receiver room besides him. I mean, they have a decent receiver 3 in Marcus Robinson, but there's not a ton of talent on that offense to make a rookie thrive the way Stafford has for years. He's had great rosters when he's been there. And other than that first year when he won a Super Bowl, they haven't been to an NFC championship. He's not the same caliber of quarterback as a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers where you can count on him to get you there every year. He'll find a way. He's just too old for that. His skill set was never that elite. He's been a top-paid quarterback in the league for almost his entire career, and it's what killed Detroit, and it's probably what's going to kill LA for a couple years. I think there's a chance that Stafford retires before this deal is up. I'm still waiting to see the details. If it's 2 years, then really what's the harm in signing him, right?
Yeah, they still haven't released it, which is really questionable.
I almost wonder if there's a discrepancy in terms of the length of the deal. That can happen sometimes where a team is attached to a quarterback, but not for that long. I would hope that the details come out and he's signed for no more than 3 years for, like I said, for being the absolute ceiling, but that's just really to do right by him. You would hope that he'd retire 2 or 3 years into that. But a 2-year deal, I mean, if he's willing to accept that he's not going to be in the league in 2 years, that's ideal for the Rams, absolutely. Sean McVay's still young, still finding ways to revolutionize the NFL offense. Very young defense, electric young receiver in Puka Nacua. Get him a young quarterback to elevate his game.
And lastly, I think this isn't a guy who's been some Iron Man his whole career like Tom Brady has. This is an older guy who's dealt with injuries in Detroit. He's dealt with injuries in LA. He was injured just last year. This isn't some guy who's, towering over the defenders and is just this big guy who's able to take these hits. He's been proven to not sustain his success the later the year goes on, almost like a Kyler Murray or other guys who can't seem to stay on the field in November and December because their body just betrays them. So
you look at some of the backups that Stafford has had in LA alone, and we look at Baker Mayfield prior to getting a deal with Tampa. I believe Sam Darnold was there for a spell. Carson Wentz for a time. He's had some solid backups because he's just very unreliable in terms of his health. Great player, clutch in some moments, but you can't count on him all the time just because he's not able to stay healthy. So another year older, I don't see why you're giving him a deal now. If you restructured him last year, extended him for 2 years, that's fine. But right now, this just doesn't seem like the right time. I feel like there's a lot of optimism for LA given the young talent that they have. So once again, handcuffing yourself to an aging quarterback is just not going to do you any good.
100%, I agree.